I do not fear backsliding in my health or in my healing, and I don't think anyone should if they've taken the proper approach. I actually think it makes no sense scientifically. And I want to talk about three reasons why I don't fear backsliding. So hopefully it can help assuage some of the fears you might have about this idea that you are going backwards in your healing, especially when symptoms reemerge or we fall into old coping patterns and behaviors. Every single woman that I work with has a fear that she is backsliding. In the beginning, we're feeling good, like we are getting our groove. We are starting to do this stuff. We're starting to see the shifts and the changes and the ebbs and the flows in our lives. And then inevitably life happens, right? And something really challenging might happen, or just something stressful enough to kind of test out this new trial run of how you move through the world and how you're feeling. And there's this sense that if we are anything but absolutely perfect through that experience, it is proof that we still have more healing to do, that we have backslid, that we are kind of back to square one or pretty close to it. And it becomes this fruitless, relentless effort at trying to perfect our journey as if it is linear and gathering evidence against ourselves when it inevitably isn't, that we have failed in some way, or something in the work is not working for us, or we truly are unfixable, unsolvable, and broken. And this belief is prevalent enough, this idea of backsliding in kind of conventional mental health space, but also just it's human nature, right? To start to compare back to the past and say, that feels really similar to my present. That must be exactly what's going on, because our nervous systems are predictive. They love that. But it creates so much fear and stress and conflict and anxiety that it can really be a huge piece of what holds us back from moving on if we don't address it directly and reframe and kind of rewire our beliefs around this concept of backsliding, and also around our various emotional states. And I will share a little bit more on that as I'm talking through these three reasons that I am not ever going to be, nor am worried about backsliding, nor do I think I ever have. So the first reason is kind of the most common that you would hear on this. It's kind of the science behind why, and I share about this in my TED Talk and talk about the realization or the scientific finding of neuroplasticity, that we as humans are plastic, meaning that our nervous systems can adapt and change over time. And the kind of conventional wisdom prior to the discovery of neuroplasticity was this idea of you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? Like once you have learned something, once you are doing something, you are stuck that way, and there is no way to break out of that identity, that pattern of behavior. And so the gorgeous thing about neuroplasticity is that it opened up the field to greater hope and self discovery and willingness to be flexible in our lives. And it really set the foundation for nervous system work in general, even though the idea of somatic work came a little bit later. And now we've even expanded the term neuroplasticity to bioplasticity to incorporate a more holistic sense of the experience, right? And what neuroplasticity tells us is that over time, as our subconscious, our body is collecting all of this data, so much data that we are not consciously aware of as we move through our days, as we learn more, read more, practice more, all of that stuff, as we talk to people, as we reflect, we will eventually get to a point where all of that becomes integrated, starts to really sink in if we pair that understanding with new lived experience primarily. So, this is why you hear about things like spontaneous sobriety, right? That somebody was really, really struggling with drinking and then just one day woke up and was like, I'm done. It's not that from the day before to the day then, they had this massive epiphany and completely shifted who they were. It's that they were collecting data through the lived experience of drinking and how much it was no longer serving them, and maybe some periods of sobriety and how much better they felt during those periods, enough to take all that data in their subconscious, pile it together, and come to a different conclusion about what the better behavior is for protective benefit moving forward, right? And so neuroplasticity is the primary reason we don't have to fear backsliding, because you can't unlearn what your system has learned. So if you've been doing a lot of somatic work, if you have been, starting to see progress because you're really into vagal toning and you are starting to visualize and rewire the subconscious, maybe you're getting into a little dispensa and stuff like that. Even if you hit a rough period and certain things that feel familiar to your past experience come up, they cannot be identical. One, because of time, right? But two, primarily because they are maybe regurgitations of what was, protective or prioritized in the past, but not entirely the same experience, because you have new data, you have new information, you have new lived experience for your nervous system of a different way of being, and you are building in that foundation of recognizing that new way of being is actually more of a benefit to you, not from your greatest happiness, though I'm sure they kind of go hand in hand, but to your subconscious and nervous system, more of a benefit to you from a protective lens. The way that we do that, right, is by rewarding, celebrating these new ways of feeling, yes, but also their short and long-term impacts in our lives that serve us to a better capacity in terms of safety. So the science is great. It's fabulous. And it really, again, gives us that foundation of, okay, like maybe there is some truth to the idea that backsliding isn't possible. But what I find makes that solidify even further is taking an approach to nervous system healing and healing in general that is focused on a permanent emotional shift over just an intellectual one. What I mean by this is a lot of work, nervous system work in particular, because that's kind of my channel, carries a placebo effect matched with a temporary kind of short-term relief and feeling better. And then the individual in that work or program either gets booted out because it's like a 4 to 6 week program, or they think, aha, like I am cured, I'm good to go. And they go back into their life, the life that they built with survival patterning and all of the old beliefs that they felt were protective. So naturally, some components of it are going to be misaligned and create stress. And they really haven't had a lot of time to solidify this new baseline, this new way of moving through the world, and this new way of thinking. They are working against decades of old patterning, and maybe they kind of revamped some of that, had some epiphanies in the short term, right? And then that individual will say, I'm backsliding, because they will go back into all these situations that make it inevitable that they are not going to feel as great as they do in that moment permanently, and they'll give up. They'll lose hope. They'll start to do what we talked about, the piling on a million things to try and fix it and make it, go away faster. And then they won't know what's working and what isn't. And then they will start to burn out on healing. And then they'll start to hate themselves. And then they'll start to, and it just goes on and on and on. And now they are stressing about the stress. They are stressing about the symptoms and just agitating them, flaring them up. And it's a vicious cycle. It is one that I lived in, right? Start to feel better, get hope back, either leave that support too early or be told, hey, you're good to go, right? In an unreasonable amount of time. Again, considering working against lifelong patterns that have been deeply ingrained and had data built into them, right? And I would blame myself. And I would live in this roller coaster of kind of like get a little better, crash again, better, crash again, better, crash again. But each time that I did, it was more evidence that I was backsliding, that I was unsolvable, unfixable. So those crashes would be deeper and deeper and more intense. There are not enough programs out there that care about aftercare. I mean, it's insane. We see it across the industry as a whole, not just in the course coaching space, but in, private treatment, rehabs, even in physical treatment in hospitals. There's always this idea, okay, we've done our part here, good luck. Get out there and go deal with the hard stuff, that is really living with that experience in a longer term way and healing in a sustainable way, not just in that short term temporary way. And it's so aggravating because I really do work with a lot of women who are like, I have tried everything. And they don't want to try something that takes more time. They, more than anyone else starting out on their journey, want a 30-day quick fix. But there is so much conditioning under there on top of the already conditioned protective mechanisms that caused the dysregulation, the chronic stress, the burnout in the first place, that it takes some time, right? In my experience, at least 6 months, usually closer to like 8 to 12. And so aftercare is really important. It's not just about the learning the practice. It's not just about doing the practice. It's not just about getting the wins and seeing the symptoms subside and seeing life get better. But it's about having enough time that inevitably, when things go a little awry, you know exactly where to come back to. You have that support to just keep reconditioning the new pattern of believing, of feeling, of sensation, of safety. Emotional shifts take time. We're smart women. We can intellectually shift around things pretty quickly, and it might feel really good. I talk often about the aha moments in therapy, like, oh, I put it together, I logicked it, right? But actually, emotionally feeling different about it, that takes time. That takes a whole host of new data. And if you do this outside of a container, it can take years because you have to collect all those little bits of data on your own. Inside of a container with subconscious rewiring and somatic, body-based retraining, the time gets shortened because there's an intentional creation of synthetic data that feels legitimate to your system and on a subconscious level, but is really just occurring in your fabrication of your experience, right? So that's reason number 2 that I don't believe in backsliding, because I have created an emotional shift. And I believe so long as we have that, we're not going back. There's a permanent shift in the way that we view the world, a permanent foundation of recognizing we are safe. And that comes from a permanent foundation of recognizing we are our own safety net. We can trust ourselves no matter what. We have got this. And then the third reason that I don't worry about this idea of backsliding and falling back into my old patterns and cycles of stuckness in survival mode, right? Is because I do not equate being healed to being perfect, and I do not equate being regulated to being calm all the time. Being regulated sometimes means being dysregulated. When we're talking about nervous system healing and regulation, we are not talking about being chill all the time. Like, that's just not going to happen, especially if you're a high achieving woman who has an impactful yet stressful life. The idea is that the stress doesn't phase you so much. It's that you come back to homeostasis after it, and that your reaction to something, kind of sticky that happens doesn't keep you locked in it for days or weeks or months. You're not stuck in an emotional state. You're flexible. You're fluid through them. You're not really holding on to one as much of anything beyond, yeah, that rocked me a little bit and let me move it on forward, right? Within reason to the event that occurred. But on your day to day, things aren't already sending you into such a spiral. When we fear certain emotional states, when we fear even our symptoms that come from certain emotional states, one of my big ones was whenever I was stressed or anxious, I would get really bad gut issues. And then I feared those gut issues as signs that I wasn't better. And I feared the fact that I was stressed. And I kind of resented myself for it. I was like, come on, like, get over it. I saw certain emotions as good while others were bad, some as acceptable while others were, absolutely not meant to serve a place in my life. And that is a form of perfectionism, right? Feeling that we are not allowed to be a full, robust human experience of our emotions, only the ones that are deemed societally acceptable or acceptable to us when we were young girls and told how we should be behaving and moving through the world. And so, what goes in hand in tandem with a more permanent emotional shift towards safety is not only recognizing, hey, I am safe in this present moment, but it is also recognizing that none of your emotions are going to get you. None of them are bad. None of them are a sign that you're unhealed. None of them are really a problem. They're a neutral language of, hey, this is something to pay attention to. When we take those 30-day resets or those 4 to 6 week courses or those, different approaches that are trying to speed up the process of essentially feeling better, all we're doing is signaling to our nervous system that it is wrong how we are feeling. It is unacceptable. It's got to go. We got to change it. We got to force it away. We got to do everything that we can, pile everything on, make sure it goes away. And what your nervous system is feeling is a part of you. So what you're doing is creating a breeding ground for internal conflict. This idea that there's parts of myself that I hate, that are not allowed, that are not acceptable, and I will do everything in my power to change them. Then you have those experiences, those emotions, those symptoms flaring up, roaring because they're trying to be heard. And you have yourself pushing back even more. And the stress that gets created as a result of fighting the stress is just the most horrendous part. And then the stress that gets created about trying to reduce the stress that you created from stressing about the stress, I mean, it is exhausting. And at a certain point, we have to just let it go. We have to stop asking why I'm feeling this way, understanding our past to get it, feeling, certain sensations as, bad or unacceptable. But that is so much easier said than done when you have been conditioned as a good girl, a perfectionist, somebody who's always nurturing, always appeasing others, always digestible. And this is where anything that doesn't focus on deep subconscious rewiring and at the layer of the body, root cause retraining of the system is going to fall short. And it might not mean, in fact, it doesn't, that you've backslid when it doesn't get you to where you want to go. But it does mean that you got a bunch of information and quick little wins and then didn't actually cement them into a permanent shift in identity and foundation in the way you move through the world. And I've learned this the hard way because that's why it took me 5 years and $200,000 to heal and still feel worse through a lot of it. It's exhausting. It is. But I really wish that I had at least known before trying to go that route so that I wouldn't have blown not only the time and money, but so much hope and so much berating myself and so much shame and guilt. And so my hope with this video is it just gives you, yes, maybe a little bit of an aha moment. Let's call it more data to recognize you don't have to fear yourself and that this is part of the process. But also hope that if stuff isn't working, it's usually, if ever, it's not you. It's probably the approach, the practice, the way it's been conditioned through what we expect in, health and healing. And there are other avenues to support you that are based on, yes, this science that I just shared with you, but also this understanding of what it truly means to heal a nervous system that isn't just balance cortisol and calm all the time, which I know sounds sexy, but it's not going to get you to where you want to go, especially if you have been working through, again, this patterning for decades, or at least for years. And so below, I am going to drop a couple of resources, links for you that you might be interested in. What I spoke about is the foundation of my program, Nervous System Reset, which is all about permanently moving on from healing mode and into our growth journeys and shifting the way that we move through this world without having to think about it for the rest of our lives. Always be thinking about, did I do my routine right today? Do I have time for it? And only feeling better when we toss on these band-aid approaches. So we're relying on them. And that's not good enough. That's not living. That's symptom management. And so I'll share a link to Nervous System Reset below. I will also share a link to my Nervous System mini course. And this is a roadmap that's going to help you to start to integrate and embed some of nervous system lens practices into how you approach your health beyond just aha moments. There's lots of demos and practice visualizations and subconscious rewiring in there. So you can at least, even if you're not ready to go like, okay, let's do this thing, start to get the foundation of the practices creating tangible shift in your life and not just rewarding intellectualization and thinking it through anymore.